You are walking through a dense, prehistoric forest. You encounter a stranger from a different tribe, and for the first time in history, you don't reach for your spear. What changed? Why did our ancestors stop viewing every outsider as a lethal threat and start viewing them as a potential partner? This is the story of how humans hacked their own biology to build civilization. It is a story of neurochemistry, game theory, and the evolution of the handshake. For most of the Paleolithic era, small bands of humans lived in near total isolation. We are talking groups of 20 to 50 individuals. Everyone knew everyone. If someone stole your berries or broke a social norm, there was nowhere to hide. Your reputation was your survival. This is known as the Dunbar number limit. Robin Dunbar, an evolutionary psychologist, suggests our brains are hardwired to maintain roughly 150 stable relationships. Beyond that, the social glue dissolves. But something shifted around 50,000 years ago. This is often called the cognitive revolution. We started trading, not just within our families, but with strangers living miles away. To trade with a stranger is a massive gamble. You provide value, and you trust them to provide value back. If you are wrong, you lose your resources or your life. So, how do we bridge that gap of mistrust? We started by using expensive physical signals. Think of these as biological hostages. In archaeology, we see shells from the Mediterranean appearing in caves in Central Europe. We see obsidian from volcanic regions found hundreds of miles from the source. These weren't just pretty trinkets. They were tokens of intent. They signaled that you were part of a wider network of exchange. It was like wearing a uniform or carrying a passport. But objects can be stolen. To really trust someone you don't know, you need something more reliable than a shell. You need oxytocin. Often called the love hormone, oxytocin is the secret weapon of human cooperation. Research from neuroscientist Paul Zak has shown that when we engage in acts of trust, our brains release a spike of oxytocin. It lowers our defenses and increases our desire to bond. Think of it as a neurochemical lubricant. But here is the catch. Our brains didn't evolve to dump oxytocin for just anyone. We evolved to release it when we share a common ritual. Look at the handshake. It is a universal gesture, but it's actually a brilliant prehistoric security protocol. By extending your right hand, you are signaling two things. First, you aren't holding a weapon. Second, you are physically tethering yourself to the other person. It forces a moment of proximity. It makes it impossible for either of you to strike without the other noticing. But even with handshakes and rituals, we needed a scalable system for trust. This is where game theory enters the chat, specifically the tit-for-tat strategy. In the 1980s, Robert Axelrod ran a famous tournament to determine the most effective way to handle the prisoner's dilemma. He invited mathematicians and sociologists to submit strategies for a game where two people can either cooperate or defect. The winner, by a wide margin, was tit for tat. The strategy is simple. You start by cooperating. Then, whatever your opponent does in the previous round, you do in the next. If they help you, you help them. If they stab you in the back, you punish them immediately. But here is the genius part. You are also quick to forgive. If they start cooperating again, you go right back to being a partner. Ancient humans practiced this instinctively. It allowed tribes to test each other. You send a small gift. If the stranger returns a gift of equal value, you send a bigger gift. If they keep the first gift and vanish, you write them off as a defector. You tell the rest of your tribe, and the stranger loses their access to the network. This brings us to the importance of gossip. We usually think of gossip as a negative trait, but from an evolutionary perspective, it is a high-speed data network. When you talk about someone, you are trading reputation data. In a world without written contracts or police, reputation was the only currency that mattered. By establishing a shared reputation, we lowered the cost of entry for new relationships. But what happened when our populations hit the thousands? We couldn't know everyone's reputation anymore. We couldn't rely on individual gossip. This is when we invented the ultimate trust-scaling technology, mythology. Yuval Noah Harari argues that humans are the only species capable of believing in shared fictions. We could believe in a common God, a common ancestor, or a common set of laws. Suddenly, I didn't need to know you personally. I just needed to know that you believed in the same God as me. If we both worship the same deity, we are both bound by the same moral code. If you violate that code, the God punishes you. This removed the burden of trust from the individual and placed it in the system. It is the beginning of the stranger effect. We stopped trusting the person and started trusting the shared framework. Take the ancient practice of hospitality. In the Odyssey, Greeks believed that Zeus protected strangers. To mistreat a guest was to offend a god. This wasn't just a religious rule, it was a societal survival mechanism. It ensured that traders could travel across vast distances without fear of slaughter. It turned the entire Greek world into a safe zone for economic exchange. However, this system of trust had a dark side. To trust the insider more, you have to define who the outsider is. Trust is a resource, and it is usually exclusionary. We trust those who look like us, talk like us, and pray like us. This is the root of tribalism. We see this in our brains today. We have a bias called in-group favoritism. Even in modern psychological experiments, if you tell a subject that someone is on their team, even if that team is based on something as arbitrary as a coin flip, that subject will trust them more and share resources with them. So, we are walking, talking paradoxes. We are biologically wired to be suspicious of outsiders, yet we are also the most cooperative species in the history of the planet. We built the modern world on a foundation of trust, but that foundation is made of fragile parts. Think about it. Every time you buy a coffee, you trust that the money is real, the barista isn't poisoning the drink, and the coffee beans were delivered by someone who fulfilled their part of a global contract. You are interacting with hundreds of thousands of strangers every single day. We have successfully extended the Dunbar number from 150 people to nearly 8 billion people. We did this through institutions, laws, money, and shared stories. But notice what happens when those institutions fail. When the news cycles turn toxic or the economy crashes, our old Paleolithic instincts kick back in. We pull back. We retreat into our smaller, safer tribes. We stop trusting the stranger. The lesson from our ancestors is that trust is not a natural state. It is an engineering project. It requires constant maintenance. It requires signals, rituals, reputation tracking, and shared values. The next time you walk past a stranger on the street, take a moment to realize what a massive technological achievement that encounter really is. You are both biological machines that have spent 50,000 years building a complex, invisible architecture of safety. We didn't evolve to trust the world. We evolved to build a world that is worthy of our trust. But as our tools for communication grow faster and our societies grow larger, the old ways of gauging a person's character are failing us. We are moving from a world of shared reputation to a world of anonymous digital interactions. If our ancestors thrived by turning strangers into kin, what are we doing today? Are we building better bridges, or are we retreating into the safety of the cave? The history of civilization proves that the bigger the circle of trust, the more prosperity we create. But every time we break that circle, we go back to the prehistoric baseline: fear, isolation, and the spear. The choice of who we include in our circle is not just a social preference, it is a biological survival strategy. We are the descendants of those who figured out how to sit at a table with the stranger. The question is, how much longer can we keep the seats available?